Alright guys, now it's time to talk about the Star Wars original trilogy, not the prequels or anything else yet. It's just about what I see in the original trilogy rather than reviewing them. I'll review the movies themselves at some point later on, but it's just time for me to talk about what I see in them as well as seeing them when I was younger. Now, I've had a long history with Star Wars. Ever since I was younger, I've played Star Wars Battlefront, the demo, and the real game for the PlayStation 2. The demo had the Battle of Endor, where you get to play as either the Rebels or the Empire to either protect or to destroy the shield bunker, which I gotta admit, it's still addictive playing to this day. And then there's Star Wars Battlefront 2, which had to do more with the prequels, and it was made a year later. And I gotta admit, it still feels great playing these games just again. And I also have to think of characters like Chewbacca the Wookiee. I always thought of him as a giant bear-skin looking creature. And then there's R2-D2, who is just a little droid who looks like a metallic trash can that beeps and wobbles and screams when it gets hurt. And then there's the puppet Yoda, voiced by Frank Oz, who later became CG in the prequels. And what about the original trilogy itself? Well, I never got to see them when I was younger, considering that Star Wars is considered one of the most classic and most biggest pieces of cinema that everyone has ever seen, but I have seen them recently, and I can see why every movie is great, especially when it all started with A New Hope. And I love them. I mean, it would have been great if I saw them when I was younger, but I do remember watching clips, like seeing Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back on TV when he was about to open his helmet, and you could briefly see him. I mean, I remember that. That scene kind of confused me what he would look like without his helmet on, but I did see Hayden Christensen as young Darth Vader in several magazine articles back in 2005. We'll talk more about young Anakin in the prequels. And then I also remember clips of the Emperor. Now, the Emperor is obviously Darth Vader's master throughout the whole series, ever since the prequels, mainly Revenge of the Sith. And I've seen spoofs and parodies of the Emperor and several other movies and cartoons. And I also briefly remember watching clips of the Emperor talking to Darth Vader, and I gotta admit, the Emperor is very menacing and evil, and Ian McDiarmid, who played the Emperor, sure knows how to have fun, especially in Revenge of the Sith and occasionally in Return of the Jedi. And I have to admit, Star Wars is definitely a big series. I mean, I never knew about why they have lightsabers and why they have the Force, with sci-fi and fantasy and all that. And we obviously know that the Force is pretty much like a little religion that people would never know of, but then suddenly, out of nowhere, whenever the prequels came in, they had to be ruined by the quote-unquote midichlorians from this movie right here. They had to ruin it. I mean, come on. With young Anakin getting midichlorians, the highest amount, that just really made things bad. One other scene that I do also remember from the original trilogy would have to be the Hoth battle. I mean, come on. The Imperial Walkers, the AT-ATs, are still revolutionary. Just, my god. They're just amazing. I mean, I can see why these special effects were pretty innovative back then, and yeah, I can see why they're pretty great. I mean, I don't understand I missed out on all this when I was younger. I mean, I was growing up at the time when the prequels were around, and I never saw neither of the movies until recently. And then there's also the original trilogy again, whenever we got to go back to see Luke grow up to become a Jedi. And we never knew that he was going to be a true Jedi or a Sith Lord if he joined his dad, Darth Vader, spoiler alert. And I can see why everyone just admires Luke so much in the original trilogy. And I get that the new trilogy will probably have Luke as like the Yoda or Obi-Wan of the trilogy, but I don't know, because I still haven't seen The Force Awakens yet. And by the way, I just recently heard that that the episode 8 will be called The Last Jedi. And I know I'm going off topic about the sequel trilogy that Disney's gonna make, but that's just a little extra info for those of you all who are just really want to know what I feel about Star Wars recently in my channel. But anyway, back to the original trilogy. Ever since when Luke was a baby, he was raised by his aunt and uncle, who were the step siblings of Anakin. Whenever Anakin's mother was with another guy. If you want to find out more, watch Attack of the Clones, and you'll find out why Luke's aunt and uncle have been raising him. You can see why. And we can also see how they're trying to protect him from knowing about who he really is, who his father really is, and who Obi-Wan was, you know. Because he was watching over Luke ever since he was a baby, and then he later changed to being called Ben Kenobi instead of Obi-Wan Kenobi. But then Luke just wants to get out into the open and spend some more time with his friends, helping the rebels out to destroy the Empire. But then you'll soon realize he's not just that, he's gonna be a Jedi soon, raised by Obi-Wan and then later by Yoda in the Empire Strikes Back. Here's an iconic scene right here where Luke watches those two suns in the Tatooine sunset with the magical music. I mean, come on, John Williams sure knows how to make some big music. And I can see why everyone loves this scene, and I've seen a lot of people reenact it in several different videos. Hell, there's a lot of people reenacting several Star Wars scenes and parodies and fan films and all that. Robot Chicken and Family Guy did it. Hopefully there'll be people spoofing the sequel trilogy someday soon. And well, the Force is strong with Luke. Oh, and by the way, 20th Century Fox no longer owns Star Wars, as well as Paramount not owning Indiana Jones, because somehow, back in 2012, some major company purchased Lucasfilm, and that is none other than the big conglomerate itself, Disney. It now owns Star Wars, so recently Disney has been making a ton of Star Wars movies. I mean, they're still making them. There's still, you know, the anthology films. I mean, that sure is a big deal. And by the way, I also did a VHS collection update on the Star Wars original trilogy as well, just last year during the summer. So I have 2 versions, by the way, and I already did a video on it. As you can see, I made it brighter because the video itself was a little too dark, but not to worry. I'll make an update because I'm going to buy the original Red Label Fox VHS tapes as well as the 2000 VHS tapes to match with the prequels. There are a lot of versions of Star Wars on VHS. Even if they were on special edition, there's still a lot of them. And by the way, I already talked about the special edition on this video too, where there were so many changes, mainly in both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, like the Greedo shooting first, the dumb scene with the dance in Return of the Jedi, and so much more. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, we have to wrap this up real quickly. Before we finish up, I have to admit, I thought Return of the Jedi had a much better ending. I mean, the series should have ended there. I'm sorry. For those of you fans of the sequel trilogy, I'm glad that you like the sequel trilogy, but all I know is that the Star Wars series should have ended in Return of the Jedi. It was one of the best endings in history. It really is. Seeing all the Ewoks singing Yub Nub, or that other song that was played in the special editions. And by the way, I prefer the Yub Nub song over the new song in the special editions, by the way. I don't like those planets celebrating, and I especially don't like how Jar Jar Binks is very briefly seen Naboo celebrating, which is also in the special editions. But anyway, one extra bonus I have to admit is that Star Wars pays tribute to a lot of movies and other serial epics around the 30s and 40s. From what I've heard, Star Wars is basically like an inspiration from various movies like The Wizard of Oz and the Kurosawa films and so many other westerns and you know, like Flash Gordon and all those other, you know, epic serial films. That's from what I've heard. I mean, Star Wars can, you know, make elements from different series and combining them all into one big film. There are some people who can recognize it, but then there's other people who can notice it, but not really can tell exactly. And I can especially tell with Wizard of Oz because, like James Rolfe said from Cinemassacre, Chewbacca is like the Cowardly Lion and C-3PO is the Tin Man. And one other thing is that The Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'll think about reviewing it sometime soon, later this year. Now, like I said before, Return of the Jedi is by far the best way to end the Star Wars series. And by the way, this ending actually has Sebastian Shaw in it, not Hayden Christensen. That's a much better choice because it doesn't make sense to have a young Anakin with old Obi-Wan and old Yoda, or Puppet Yoda. Now, I just like to say, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I hope you all comment and subscribe, and stay tuned for more new videos. So peace out, rock on, and have a nice day.